Well, good morning. My name is Paul.
And I'm Steve, and this is the Better Human Dads Dadcast. Our mission is simple: to equip and inspire fathers with the tools, knowledge, and community needed to grow into emotionally present and supportive dads. And very excited today to have Nick Cardone from the East Coast just to share his experience and his professional experience as well on being a dad. And so we've got a number of questions for you. And but first, if you don't mind, can you share, Nick, a little bit about your background and yourself?
Sure, and good morning to you both. And again, thanks for having me on the podcast. Very honored. What can I say? Live in Halifax. Been here for 20 years, but originally from Toronto. Um, you know, from what my sort of world looks like these days. I live in this gift of a house in Halifax where I've got a couple kids who are still in the house. My younger two, 12 and 15, Bianca and Gwen, yeah, gifts in my world. The next one up is Zoe, who is just literally on her way back from her first year at Concordia University. She's coming back home,
Fantastic.
and
Nice.
and then I've got a much older daughter from a previous relationship a long time ago. She's 37 years old now, and her name is Leah, and she's in the military, based
Wow.
in Edmonton, just up the highway from you there, Steve.
Okay.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's fantastic. Um,
shoveling snow.
yeah, totally.
Up until last week, we were. Trust me, it's been a nightmare out here.
Yeah,
Man.
well,
Um,
actually, you know what? She's been doing training in Kingston, and I
oh,
saw her, and I happened to see her in Toronto last week as she was driving through, and so she's been taking her time, so she's probably getting back there right now. Hopefully, the snow's melted.
oh, it's all gone now, but you never know. It's only
Yeah,
May,
For
as they
now.
always say out here. It's just
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Hey, so to kick it off, maybe Nick, if you can share, what was the relationship you had with your dad?
Uh, uh, I'll say complicated doesn't sound uh, honest enough. It's almost like we were kind of saying off the air there. It was almost there was I'll say the kind of distance that at the time I just thought was normal, um, that certainly perpetuated this belief that this is the way dads are supposed to be,
Hmm.
but deep down I knew, subconsciously, and as I got older, realized that the way my dad showed up in the world wasn't always the ways that I needed. Um, and so we'll say again, emotionally distant. Definitely inherited a lot of those sort of traditional masculine, sort of fatherly um, traits around being, stoic, which could be again, emotionally distant, and being the disciplinarian, certainly being the main provider in the house. Um, um, yeah, but also like not very involved in sort of day to day house stuff, and so um, so somewhere in there is immense gratitude for how hard he worked, provided for us, um, and I would gladly have given up, all the days that worked for just hang out. What I do know both, I knew this when I was younger, but I know now because of my work, and is that he's a product of his environment as well. And growing up in
Right.
rural Italy, I've heard his father, was quite a mean character as well, and so that's what my
Yeah.
dad grew up in front of, and so where I'm going with this is that there were glimmers. I can like count on one hand, less than one hand, these sort of glimmers where dad actually, momentarily showed up in ways that were really sort of genuine, authentic ways that I really sort of needed. And I'll never forget,
Mm.
my partner at the time and I, we were both teachers, at the time, and we were going to work in South America for a couple of years, and you know, he and my mom took us to the airport, and as we were saying goodbye, it's honestly one of the two times in my life, and my dad lived to like, you know, 70 years old. It's one of the two times in my whole life that I saw him cry.
Oh, okay.
And because I'm about to leave for the next couple of years, and so something beautiful in that moment, right, where he allowed himself that, you know, I'm sure he was embarrassed about it. I'm sure he whatever, but I didn't care. So,
Well, you know, it's interesting, isn't it, that you recognize that he was a product of his dad, and his dad is probably a product of his dad. And you know, one of the beautiful things about the Better Human Dads is we're trying to break that chain. We're trying to let dads know that, you know what, your dad isn't who you are. And so, thank you for sharing. You know,
yeah,
Nick,
you're
that's
welcome.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So, you know, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, well, I was going to say, sometimes I think of it as like, it's like up downstream kind of work, right? It's like, you know, upstream, what's the sort of chain of influences, right? And yet downstream, there's our kids. Doesn't matter what flavor our kids are, but how can we influence those people? Because eventually
Yeah,
they're going to be the upstream people influencing next generation of kids. And
so
so,
true. Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
so
Great way
I'll
to
say
put it.
this. I'll say this also about my dad. Again, like, I don't think he actually felt comfortable or knew how to not just express emotion, but to connect. And yet, in his work, you know, a lot of people gifted him booze, and so there were sometimes, honestly, there were like cases of like scotch and cognac in the basement cold room. And whenever I would sort of come to visit and then go back to university, Dad would, in his like mafia voice, is like, go get a bottle of scotch and take it to the liquor store. Because you could take unopened bottles of booze and take it to the liquor store and give you the money back. You just said, oh, gift.
Oh, so right.
And so that was
Those are the old
those
days.
ways. Yeah. That was one of his ways of, you know, showing his love, is through, you know, the gifting of something financial. And so that's something that he felt. And so there's beauty in those micro moments, and I never want to ignore those, despite all the other ways that, you know, he didn't show up, or, you know, could sometimes be an arsehole as well. So
yeah. Well, you know, we use this term, Nick, Better Human Dads, and when you got that question, I'm curious, what came up for you?
So again, off air, you guys mentioned the acronym, so I will find out about that some other time. But better to me is, there's two parts. One is around this notion of evolution, right? So what is a sense of change over time, and when I, you know, think about wanting to be a better dad than my dad was for me, I don't necessarily want to make it sound like I'm shitting on my dad. You know, yeah, he could be a prick sometimes, and not show up in ways that I really needed. As a hockey goalie, he was literally the stereotypical dad who, even if we won, he'd point out the goals that I let in, like that kind of shit.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
And so I want to be a better dad in some of those ways to my kids, right? And so that notion of evolution, how can I show up as a sort of grounded, positive, influential, supportive, and emotionally available parent to my kids. Again, relatively speaking, better than my dad. The other piece, which is important, is to sort of connect to this. Connects quite directly to the work that I do in sort of men's mental health. Better for me is also around helping shift the culture of masculinity, traditional masculine norms, traditional sort of fatherhood. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that some of those traditional fatherly kind of ways are necessarily bad, but, you know, provider, disciplinarian, you're not really participating domestically. You know, you're not very sort of emotionally connected. Like, just, and we could go on, and so I talk about this all the time in my work. How can we look at those norms, ask ourselves, well, are these behaviors, are these characteristics that I actually want to, imbue in my life or not, right? I'm sure you guys have heard the story, the fish and water story. It was a commencement address years ago. Two fish are swimming through the ocean. They're talking like fish do, right? And in the other direction, another fish comes along, an older fish. And as he's swimming by, he leans over to the two younger fish and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And then keeps swimming by. And then eventually, the younger fish looked at his buddy and it's like, "What the hell's water?"
Good. That's funny.
That's good.
And that ocean, and again, the water's all around them, so they don't know it exists. The same thing applies with how we experience the expectations that are placed on us by our parents, by our peers, by our media, whatever. And same thing goes with parenthood and masculinity and fatherhood. And we don't ask ourselves, what the hell is this water? And do I want this water to be around me? Then we'll never know better. So my work is around bettering how we show up as fathers by asking the questions of how we're showing up.
Well, when we, when we were putting together, I was going to say, with the concept of better, because it can be perceived in a couple of different ways. Someone might think I'm better than you, right? But for us, it's better than yesterday.
Yeah.
And so the acronym that we've worked on is the B is for be aware of your actions, and the language you use and what you're doing. E is engaging with your kids at their level, like getting down on the floor and playing with them or whatever that requires. T is tell them you love them, always, often, as you can. We're realizing now how important this is, and a lot of the dads that we spoke to have not heard that. Did not hear that from their dads. Taking ownership of your actions. We've heard that a lot of the dads so far have changed their behaviors really to become better at being a dad. E is very much what you're doing, elevating others to be better human dads. So helping people inspire others. And lastly, role modeling. So understanding that I'm going to role model the behavior I want for my kids. And just recently, as we talk about the seasons of kids, and we're talking about, the first season, to kind of like 0 to 12 is learning, and 13 to 19 is kind of forming or exploring, let's say, and trying things, and then 20 plus is becoming that person. And the thing that's most poignant for me is that our job ultimately is to help them get ready to leave, which is really hard. I mean, you've gone through it, so you know what that's like. But and I'm going through it right now, and it's killing me. But the better for us is really truly about, what can I do to be better myself tomorrow? So that's
we're the ones,
thanks for that.
We're the ones that have to change, right? Like as dads, we have to be the example, we have to be the role model and show our kids how to change, how to get better. So thank you for that.
There's a song. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go on.
I was going to say there's a song for me. It's called "I Love You More Today Than Yesterday." It's an old song, Spiral Staircase. We're talking 60s, and it's so connected for me because it's really about like you get better every day, and so
I'll throw a song back at you that if we tried to sing, no one would be listening to the podcast anymore. So and I use this in my work. Sadly, I'll say it finally came to me. You guys, I'm sure, probably remember the mass shooting that took place in Nova Scotia back in 2020. And the anniversary just passed. And I was invited as a content expert to co-write a report with my colleague Brian Berganza on men, like masculinity, mental health, and violence. And when I presented in front of the commission, it finally dawned on me as a long-time Rush fan. Which
you
guys are of a
absolutely.
Yeah. So,
2112.
Yeah. So it took me God knows how many years of being a Rush fan before I finally realized the relevance of this line: to my work. All right. And I know you know the song, but I'm not going to sing it, but I'll just speak it. And the men who hold high places must be the ones to start to mold a new reality that's closer to the heart.
That's nice. Wow.
Right?
Yeah, I would.
From closer to the heart, and you know, we can for me, men in high places are never about, you know, powerful people necessarily, although that's true too, but it's anyone in a position of influence or authority, or, you know, teaching, mentoring in any way, shape, or form over others, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a construction, you know, site supervisor, anything like that. You have capacity to live and role model in ways that are closer to the heart, so that the world becomes a better place in some way. And that includes
That's a great
as
point.
fathers.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm so grateful you guys are doing this work. This is amazing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So looking back, and actually not even looking back, looking to today and
Yeah.
living your life, what's some of the greatest lessons you've learned as being a dad?
Um, so thanks for sending those questions, Steve. So I knew on this one for quite a while. I scribbled down some notes before we jumped on the call, but I don't know. There's kind of like a twofold response. One is around the connection to my work, and there's a lot of fucked things that's going on in the world, and you know, I feel like in many ways I'm doing my part to sort of shift that. Both, but for years my primary focus was around, quote unquote, trying to make the world a better place for men, how men and boys, and how we can show up in the world, right? So that life is, quote unquote, better for young people growing up, or whatever that is. And then I remember doing a presentation years ago. I can't remember who it was for. And I don't know, it kind of finally dawned on me that, you know, when I'm talking about, you know, mental health statistics for men and adolescents, when I'm thinking about the stories I've heard around intimate partner violence, around gender-based violence, some messed up shit going on. And in small ways, my girls, and my kids are all girls, at least that's how they identify now, they've been exposed to micro versions of some of this shit at this point in their lives. And sadly, and it scares the snot out of me, I know that they're going to be exposed, as the older they get, to more and more sketchy kind of crap in the world. Sadly, I even hate to say the words because it just scares the crap out of me, but at the hands of other men and boys. And so the lesson in there is that, oh, this work I'm doing is also not just about making the world a better place for men and boys. It's about making the world a better place for my girls.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And so this presentation, I found this picture of me and the girls, and I use that all the time to frame that for people. Sorry, Paul, what were you going to say there?
No, it's true, because it helps your work. I can really see helping your daughters just as much as men and boys, because like you say, they're dating these men and they're dating these boys, right? And so let's just go back here. If you had an opportunity to rewind and start over, would you have done anything different?
So again, another one I sort of thought about for a bit. My gut response, honestly, is a no, which isn't in any way, shape, or form about some sort of parental arrogance or anything like that. I think, you know, even the times that I've messed up as a dad or a partner or just as a human being, I think I'm reflective enough. I think I have good sort of bumpers in my world, people to sort of reflect myself back to me, so I can sort of see through other people's eyes. I would say that I'm really quite gifted in that regard, having really close people in my life to reflect those things back to me. And so I get to learn from that shit, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and learning, again, learning experientially is a much more grounded way to sort of carry whatever lessons home to how I show up on the day to day. But yeah, but also how I can then sort of pass some of those lessons on. So the shit that I've been through, the stupid ways in which I might have shown up, um, yeah, I firmly believe I refer to myself as a clinician as a shit management consultant, um, and
SMC.
yeah, and
Yeah, that's
and the
interesting.
same
That's
thing
funny.
applies to me, right? Because
Yeah. It's
if
good.
we're managing even literal shit, if we're managing
Yeah.
it as best as possible, it's going to turn into compost, something that can
Yeah.
fertilize something else, right?
Yeah.
And I need to believe that thing applies for me as well. That my own shit can fertilize some other aspect of my life or how I'm serving someone else, and that is especially
Yeah.
true for my kids.
Oh yeah.
You know, we one of the phrases we're finding that's being coined quite often is participation, not perfection.
Yeah.
And and so that's, I think, you know, of course we're picking up all of this data, you could say, but it's so true. It's just like, just get in, get dirty, you know, participate,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't worry about being perfect. So yeah, there's no,
Yeah.
you know, it's a challenging job.
Yeah. So I'll pick up on one of the the acronym, the better acronym, the all the letters stand out for me, but one that stood out a bit more was I think the second T, which is about taking responsibility. Was that what it was?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Owning our stuff. And
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if we can do that and model that in front of other people, especially our kids,
Yeah.
what a gift to pass that on, right?
Yeah. And taking
Oh, absolutely.
responsibility and not blaming anybody else, like that's
Yeah.
just golden, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Own your
Yeah.
shit,
And just
right?
do some,
Yeah.
yeah, do something about it. Own your shit. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, just if you, if another dad came up to you and said, "Hey, I'm about to become a dad," or
Hmm.
um, what kind of advice would do you think you'd pass along to
Yeah.
somebody?
Um, so you guys are familiar with the term "it takes a village to raise a child," right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So more and more as my work evolves, I'm a firm believer in sort of the expanding that statement to include takes a village to raise a village. Right?
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Because all members of the village need continual versions of love, support, encouragement, nurturing, calling into conversation, um, giggles, whatever it is, right? And it's not just the children, and so our younger two, they both went to a school, not an elementary school, not too far from here, and I don't know, we'll call it sort of. I don't even know how this originally manifested, but there's a couple guys who just knew each other somehow. Like we're all in a neighborhood, but a couple guys started just hanging out, like going out for beer every once in a while. These were other dads of similar aged kids, and then I don't even know where the term came up actually, but so WEDA stands for WEDA, or sorry, is
Yeah.
WEDA stands for West End Dads Association. And
No
it's a
way.
Oh,
Wow.
it's a dorky ass name for a bunch of dads who are all around the same age with similar aged kids to just gather. And
yeah.
originally most of the gatherings were about going out for drinks, right? Social
Mm.
connectivity, shits and giggles, whatever that was, and then it started expanding to, hey, the benches at the school look like shit, or the apples have all fallen, and all the wasps and bees are coming in. Let's go do something. Let's go volunteer. We
Oh,
bring
nice,
a
nice,
cooler,
Oh
nice.
bring
yeah.
some snacks, and do things together. And going to watch the Banff Mountain Film Festival. There's another one, or loaning
Hmm.
tools to each other, or sitting in a backyard and a bunch of us gathering, having a fire, and just shooting the shit. And so,
Huh.
Yeah.
so, so that bit of advice, that I would pass on is like, don't do your dadhood in isolation.
Mm.
Find
Hmm.
find other dads to connect with, and it doesn't have to be anything super formal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we need the support, the encouragement, the nurturing, just as much as anyone else in the village does.
Yeah.
That's,
So true.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
The whole thing about again, I'm a Rush nerd and certainly a Monty Python nerd, but we're not dead yet, and so
we're not dead yet.
if we're not dead, then what are we we're not yeah. So what are we doing to stay alive? And social connectivity, feeling seen and heard by our peers, especially our dads. Like, let's give her and be loved and supported and and playful with other dads as well.